Dr. Andrew Nevin, Chief Economist for Africa at PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, declared that Africa is much better positioned for an economic boom than China was over 20 years ago.
So it's inevitable that the GDP in Europe is going to grow slowly. It's inevitable that in China growth is going to slow down. It's inevitable in Japan GDP is going to grow slowly. So where is economic growth going to come from? It's going to come from Africa. You might say, look, we get it, but it's such a small base. But I went to China the first time in 1983, okay? In 1983 in China, there was not a single private car. There was not one private car in the entire country. There were obviously a few cars because government officials had them on that. By 2008, so no one would have said China had the chance to be one of the world's largest economies. If you went there, people were riding bicycles, they were wearing Mao suits. It was very difficult to get a good, despite the fact Chinese cuisine is so fantastic, very difficult to get a good meal in Beijing and Shanghai. And yet 25 years later, not very long, China was the largest producer of cars, and Edward will talk about this, the largest consumer of cars on that. So, economic miracles happen. And I think and I lived in China for 10 years, and I saw this, but the conditions for an economic miracle happening in Africa are much stronger than they were in China. But Lagos is projected to become the world's largest city in the world. So sometimes people come to me and they say, Andrew, you can live anywhere in the world. Why do you live in Lagos? I say, actually, because I want to live in the center of the world. And looking forward to the future, Lagos is the center of the world. And any of you who've never been to Lagos, it is a phenomenal city. I mean, the energy level, the entrepreneurism, what's going on in the city, please come to Lagos. It's nothing like the press portrays it around the world. And I love it. It's my home, so it's just...
Mrs. Kanayo Awani, Managing Director Intra-African Trade Initiatives at the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, delivered a keynote on the role of trade financing institutions play in Africa's economic development.
In Afreximbank, we believe that the continent is marching forward and indeed has made great strides. It's already been said, the economic growth is projected to expand at the fastest pace in 5 years. According to the International Monetary Fund, Africa is expected to have an overall economic growth of 3.8% in 2019, if you include the giants of Africa, Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola. And it's slightly above the global growth rate, which is forecast at 3.7%. You've already heard it that nearly half of the world's fastest growing economies this year will be African. Ethiopia, Rwanda, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Benin, Kenya, Uganda, and Burkina Faso. It is also said, as you've heard, that between 2015 and 2050, Africa will add another 1.3 billion people, more than doubling its current population of 1.2 billion. The region has a disproportionately young population, with 62% of the population under 25 years. The African middle class is projected to reach 1.1 billion by 2060. By then, more than half of Africans will be living in cities. It is my belief, therefore, that over the next 20 to 30 years, the impact that trade, finance, and the expansion of value chains will have on Africa's development agenda must be underscored. It is against this backdrop that the theme of this summit, growing trade, financing projects, developing Africa's supply chain, is timely and relevant. The importance of trade in the structural transformation process of countries, creating jobs and reducing poverty, is well documented.
The African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, along with Nazaru LLC and Westrock Coffee were the sponsors for the 2019 event. Shakira Motan, Trade Commissioner for South African Consulate Chicago, and Honorable Ben Okayan, Consul General of Nigeria New York Consulate, sat on the panel presenting investment opportunities in Africa to dispel myths and answer targeted questions from Chicago mayoral candidate Amaru Myiya.
realized that the key to getting and attracting more investment into South Africa, which is so important to reduce our levels of unemployment, is to have constant engagement with our stakeholders, to tell them about what's happening in South Africa, to be open, to be transparent, and to showcase the opportunities that are still available.
Can you go over maybe 2 recommendations or 2 pieces of advice that you give potential investors when you're showing them the different opportunities to invest on the continent?
Talking about Nigeria in specific, let me talk about the requirement of power generation. That is an area that any investor can take advantage of. The capacity generation and transmission and distribution of electricity in Nigeria is under capacity.
Leaders from the United States Export-Import Bank DC headquarters delivered presentations on the United States' federal government financing and trade programs that support U.S. businesses in fast-tracking trade with Africa.
We just yesterday, while we were here, we just got the email that they brought back our Sub-Saharan Africa Advisory Committee. So, yes, there are a lot of things happening at the bank right now, and now is the time.
Simply, our mission is to create and sustain jobs by increasing U.S. export sales.
Colonel Chris Wyatt, Director of African Studies at the U.S. Amy War College, encouraged American companies to engage commercially with Africa given the vast economic growth that the continent is projected to enjoy.
Can anybody remember in the past when an African country had the resources and the confidence of the marketplace to announce a $3 billion bond issue and then have it oversubscribed 6 times? Ghana just sold bonds for 7, 11, and 31 years. And people oversubscribed them by billions of dollars. $3 billion bond issue. They sold out like that. They want to issue 100-year bonds. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not buying 100-year bonds from anybody. Not that I don't trust the Ghanaians, but I'm not waiting 100 years to get my money back. Actually, they pay interest as it goes, so anyway. And you sell the instrument to your heirs or someone else. But the point is that if Ghana can do that, that's a good sign that things are improving the finance area. Aside from all these government efforts, that's private sector. That government's putting money out there, but that money's coming from the private sector. And people aren't just putting money there because there's oil in the Jubilee field. There's other things happening in the economic environment, macroeconomic environment in Ghana that's giving investors encouragement.
A panel of trade experts discussed challenges and opportunities in operationalizing the newly created African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
Because we have that potential, the African youth potential, which we need to capitalize on. And they are very innovative. They have ideas. And they are already doing it. We had a conversation during one of the round of negotiations on payment systems in Africa. Right. And some officials, with the public servant mentality, they were saying, you need to consult with the central banks. You need to consult with the Ministry of Finance. And one of the things I told them was, look, some of those things are already happening. And they are being made by, people you wouldn't think of. People in their 20s coming up with payment solutions. It's happening across the world.
Right.
So I think we have the potential, the human potential, and we have it at the right level, the youth. So I think trade will really happen in Africa this time around.
Yes. Right.
It's something we just need to be part of it. I think that's the challenge. Will all of us be part of it, or will some continue in, the old African skepticism? So to me, this is what is very important, to make sure that all of us, all the stakeholders, are aware of what is happening in Africa, and that those who are serious investors, they don't miss that chance, because it's actually yesterday that people were getting ready. It's not today. Today people are already are trading, and it will just keep on increasing.